My fear is that AI will just turbocharge the existing trends we see of state involvement in private activity. Humans are better off than they ever have been, and all of that is due to technological progress. Historically, sectors that are most exposed to digital automation actually have more labor inside of them, not less. Places that do less regulating will be the places that own the future.
Welcome, everyone, to Unconventional Knowledge, the GIS podcast. I'm Andrew Kurth, Managing Editor at Geopolitical Intelligence Services. In this episode, Prince Michael of Liechtenstein speaks with Adam Michel, Director of Tax Policy Studies at the Cato Institute, where he focuses on the economic and budgetary effects of taxation in the United States. Adam has held policy roles in Congress, at the Heritage Foundation, and at the Mercatus Center, and is widely published on tax and economic policy. Here is their conversation.
Everyone is talking about AI. Some are hyping it, some are investing billions in it, and some are already trying to regulate it. But empirically, new technologies have often complemented labor rather than simply substituted it. In your opinion, in what ways is AI part of a familiar historical pattern, and in what ways is it maybe genuinely different?
Thanks. That's I think, a good place to start. Historically, new technologies have increased productivity. They allow individuals to produce more in less time with fewer resources. And AI, I think, is very clearly squarely in that pattern that we've seen historically, that it will increase productivity, that it will sort of make humanity better off in that we will be able to produce more with fewer resources. AI might be different in that it is more general purpose. It will be a technology that allows many more sectors to simultaneously increase productivity. But I think it is more squarely in this bucket of the historical pattern of humans coming up with new technologies that ultimately make everyone better off.
If productivity increases, people get better off because they can in less time produce more, and that helps prosperity. And then there's always the questions whether a new technology, and that's also the case for AI, will complement labor, replace labor, change labor. And where do you see that AI is augmenting the labor force most clearly? Or is AI primarily a boost to productivity, or will it be also a tool that will replace unproductive white-collar work?
I think those three categories you mentioned, it will clearly do all three of them. It will augment existing labor, it will replace some existing tasks, and it will change the way we work in fundamental ways, I'm sure. The question is sort of which of these effects will dominate the others. And if you look around the way the places that AI is currently being used, and you look historically, the new technologies tend to emphasize more in the bucket of making existing jobs more productive and creating new jobs in excess of any jobs that they replace. Why I keep coming back to productivity, you mentioned it in passing there, that productivity simply means that workers can get paid more, that for each hour of work effort I put in, I can produce more things, which means I can get paid more for that work. So ultimately, this is how new technologies make workers better off, not only creating new jobs, but also allowing workers to be paid a higher wage. Looking around, I think AI could be used in basically every industry. If you can see it in making online commerce more efficient, manufacturing, helping with process improvements and quality control, obviously white collar work in law and finance and research. And then most obviously in software development, in coding, and sort of the hard technical skills there, AI has excelled. But even in these industries that purchase more software historically actually have a higher labor share, have more sort of people in the background than sectors that are less exposed to the software industry. I think this is instructive in how we think about how AI will evolve going forward, that at least historically, sectors that are most exposed to digital automation actually have more labor inside of them, not less. And so that should give us optimism for the role that AI will play in expanding jobs and making us more productive in a way that makes everyone better off.
How do you think it will affect the software industry? Because from what I know, AI could be a very good tool in the development of software.
It will be certainly a very useful tool in the development of software, but it will also create new functions for humans in ensuring the sort of end product is usable for people and quality control. And even a software developer, their total sort of list of job tasks is not only writing code, which is what AI is so good on. There's still interpersonal pieces of the job and things that humans will still need to do. And again, looking back at the long sort of sweep of history, the jobs that have even jobs where a piece of the tasks that are in that job bundle are automated, it means that usually businesses then invest more in the things that are harder to automate within that same job bundle. So even these jobs that look highly exposed, that doesn't mean that those jobs go away. It just means that they'll change.
There is a bit of a belief that technology will not replace people, but people who do not use the technology may be replaced by people who do. Do you think that's also the case for AI?
Yeah, most certainly. For people that choose not to adapt to a changing market in general, and sort of in any sense of evolving market processes, will be outcompeted by people who do. And AI is going to be no different. If your competitor is using a technology that is making them more productive and you choose not to adopt it, they will outcompete you. And it's that exact market force that will encourage people to adopt these new technologies and become more productive in the process.
Yeah, and I think it will also probably create different jobs or make people free for other service jobs, which is true. And traditionally, technological changes first affected blue-collar work. This time, it seems that white-collar jobs may be affected first. Even if the historical pattern is similar, will the political and social consequences be different this time that, let's say, the status and the quality of white-collar work is not as challenging anymore, and there it becomes a more monotonous work?
I think that this story is overtold, if even or even not really true. This idea that historically it's only been blue collar work, or that blue collar work has been the first industry to go. The computer replaced much of what secretaries did. Excel replaced much of what accountants used to do. AutoCAD replaced much of what architects used to do. And all of these industries then adapted. And in most cases, they put their time to higher value tasks and relied on the technology to produce more and produce higher quality outputs. So if you look back across history, we've seen this type of technological change before. I think looking at these historical analogs should give us the optimism that we can adapt and that these industries and the people in them will be able to use the new technology to their benefit rather than to their detriment.
How is it with young people? Would it be necessary to train younger people already at a quite earlier stage in the use of AI, the philosophy of AI, so they can easily enter the workforce?
Most certainly. People in school now and in entry level jobs will have to learn to use AI in whatever way their industry ultimately adopts it. Again, even entry level work is not all repetitive tasks. Most jobs still have a human element to them. And so I suspect that those jobs will emphasize those skills more going forward over some of the tasks that might be more easily done through new technologies. But businesses aren't stupid at the end of the day, right? They don't want to eliminate their talent pipeline. They will have an incentive to train people and bring these technologies into the workplace. And so I think just like the adoption of other technologies, we should expect this technology to be integrated into the workplace and adopted in training programs and educational pipelines in similar ways.
And historically, actually, and against many sort of theories of doom and gloom, actually new technologies and the use of capital to improve the way work is carried out has also increased income. And the share of income is not like many says, it concentrates on few rich, but it also frackles down to everybody. And I think with AI, if AI allows us to produce more with even fewer people, we expect also to labor keeping its share this time? And how can AI basically strengthen the income of the labor force rather than weaken it?
There's two important points here. One is as AI makes a particular industry more productive, if that industry were to eliminate jobs, that saved dollar that they're not spending on labor has to land somewhere, has to go to somewhere else in the economy. When AI makes something cheaper, people don't just stop spending, they redirect those resources to some other good or service. And so the question isn't necessarily can AI do a specific job, it's where does the next dollar, that dollar saved because of higher productivity, where does that next dollar go? Where does it land in the economy? And historically, that next dollar, that saved dollar, has found a human. It's found a human producing something that people want. And we can't necessarily predict what future looks like, but historically, that pattern has held true for quite some time. But even if labor's share of total output falls, which it hasn't over the long sweep of history, this isn't necessarily the most important question. Labor's share of income can fall, and as long as labor demand is rising at the same time, the total pie can grow faster than the individual slice the worker is getting shrinks. And so even in a world in which labor share is falling, which is not my prediction, workers can still continue to get better off over time. And so there's sort of two sides of the same story. I think both are optimistic.
Let's change a little bit the topic and coming to a topic which I think is a global problem, which are high levels of bureaucracy. But it's especially a problem in Europe, and we know that Europe is losing in the productivity race, for instance, against the United States, because it has these high levels of bureaucracy and involvement of the state in the economy. And with AI expose the unproductive character of some administrative layers, or will it make it easier to manage even more bureaucracy? Or on the other side, will AI reveal that there are a lot of white-collar jobs where people are used in unproductive ways, and by exposing that, it could show that we could use this manpower, because we have a lack of manpower in Europe, use it in a more productive way.
I think this is a really fascinating question. Both, I think, will be true. Tyler Cowen has an interesting theory where he says that the modern administrative state has been enabled by technology, that there's sort of a latent demand for some level of government, maybe higher than you and I might desire, and that it's the advent of railroads and cars and planes and phones, radio, and then the internet that all have greased the wheels for additional government administrative actions and control. So if you look in the US, if you look at the IRS code of regulations in the tax law, when word processing was introduced, the sort of word count of that corpus of documents explodes. And this is a sort of microcosm of this technology enabling additional government growth. And so I certainly think that AI will allow businesses to be able to comply with complex government regulations more easily, but that will allow government to produce more complicated and overarching, sort of intrusive regulatory requirements on the private sector. So I don't think that AI has to grow the size and scope of government, but without intentional constraints on what government can and should do, my fear is that AI will just turbocharge the existing trends we see of state involvement in private activity. And that's why it's even more important now to put constitutional constraints on government, as new technologies will continue to unleash this historical march of larger and more intrusive government.
This is a bit worrying because at the moment, at least here in Europe, government policies and policymakers move rather to increase the level of controls over business, over people, than actually decreasing it. And Europe regulates everything, but it does not necessarily put limits to the state involvement.
And that will be a problem. I think places that have limits on state power, places that do less regulating of these technologies and allow businesses to more quickly and fully integrate them into their business processes, and that government implementing them doesn't put additional layers of cost and bureaucratic sort of busy work into the system, will be the places that own the future. That, as you sort of see today, places that are freer and have smaller governments, have less government intrusion, are the places where the big startup firms want to be, where most things are produced, and places that are wealthier overall. And I suspect we'll see that trend continue. And so my hope for Europe and the United States is that we do put external constraints on the growth of government, but without them, my fear is that we'll see more of the same.
Now, this is actually not really good news, but let's hope that the mood will change, that politics will change in a way that we will have slimmer governments.
I hope so.
But now in Europe, we have also a bit of a focus to preserving old structures, which is sometimes it makes sense, but not always. But we preserve is rather than seeing disruption and job losses as a way to free labor for more productive work. And there we are quite reluctant. And here we have to find, that we just touched it before, the balance between regulating AI on one side, enabling innovation, and being, let's say, in this moment where the technology actually allows us on one side to be more productive, but on the other side also the government to exercise more control.
My recommendation is governments everywhere practice what's called permissionless innovation, allowing businesses to adopt new technologies, new processes, new ways of doing business without asking the government for permission first. Most certainly, you need sort of existing liability laws and sort of some guardrails, but businesses should not have to say, may I do this, before they implement something new. That is a surefire way to neuter forward progress. And so, in my view, the best prescription is squarely putting your thumb on the side of that scale towards allowing technology to progress, and not on the side of the scale of keeping things stuck in the past and using technologies that require more resources and more people to produce the same amount of goods and services. That's a recipe for being outcompeted by countries around the world, and a recipe for falling sort of further and further behind.
Yeah. I think already there is that awareness as well in business as in government that we will have to adopt AI. I think many don't know yet how to do it. The train is running, And do you think we have specific sectors where we can expect sharp disruptions now in this direction?
There certainly are many sectors. We already talked about software. I think we've already seen a lot of that initial break, and there will be more to come. I think we see it coming. A lot of some folks in specific industries and like legal and writing, places that really value the sort of human touch are less ready for some of the developments that AI will sort of bring to their industries. But ultimately, all of those changes will be good. Maybe not all of them will be good, but on balance, they will be good. They will increase the productivity of those sectors and allow them to produce higher quality work. But those changes will come with adjustments. And I think some people in some of these sectors haven't fully grappled with what that means.
Well, I think from what I heard that there are still quite a few that talk about AI, but they don't really know yet what to do with it and how to use it.
I think that's true across lots of different sectors. There's lots of experimentation still, figuring out where it works, where it doesn't. It doesn't work 100% in a lot of use cases that are often pointed to. So then how do you implement controls and develop it in people's workflows in a way that isn't just sort of adding another task? I think all of these questions are open-ended and ones that basically everyone should be asking at this point. How do I use this technology well? Where does it not work well? And how do I use it to my comparative advantage? So I think that will be the shift is when a lot of this turns from talk or sort of, I'll play with this a little bit and then sort of go back to the way I was always doing things. The real shift will be when these technologies are sort of directly entered into people's day-to-day workflow.
Yeah. So it is actually with AI, a little bit with most other new technologies. It has its good sides. There will be certain ways where things will be replaced, but that's necessary. And we have to be creative. New things have to come, old things to be done. And it doesn't look that as it was with the old things that one says, okay, we will have a big loss of jobs, job loss through the new technologies, but mostly the higher productivity brings again back new jobs.
Yes, I think that this is the dynamic that we've seen across history. You describe this process of creative destruction where new industries and new technologies do ultimately mean that older processes and older technologies fall by the wayside. And this has been a constant in modern human history. And that's what has driven the dramatic increases in life expectancy, declines in poverty, increases in well being across the board, in cleaner environments, access to calories. You sort of go down the list, and humans are better off than they ever have been. And all of that is due to technological progress. And AI is just simply the last sort of note of that song that is still being written.
And maybe as a last question, I want to come to a bit of a theory which I would be interested your opinion of. I think it's a bit of a weird theory that they say, well, the fact is we have in the whole developed world, we have exaggerated government debts, exaggerated government spending, and there is no solution in view how we can reduce the debt. There's nothing there. And now many people say it doesn't matter because AI will change so much in the economy that this debt will not remain as a problem.
So first, I'm going to, I think probably as you would as well, dispute the premise. It is quite easy to address most of the debt and deficit crises around the world. We need to spend less. We can't tax our way out of these problems. Government just needs to live within its means. And that tax increases often don't meet the goal of balancing budgets or stabilizing debt to GDP ratios historically, but instead it's spending cuts that are the way to do it. There are lots of historical examples of this being successful, and that it actually is more stimulative. You end up with a better faring economy after a fiscal adjustment that is primarily spending cuts than the alternative. But the idea that we don't need to go through those processes simply because AI growth will take care of all of our problems is, I think, just is simply not true. At least in the US, our debt problem is primarily driven by Social Security and healthcare entitlements. And all of these programs are more or less tied to GDP growth and wage growth. There is no plausible scenario in which we can grow our way out of these problems. Of course, growth will help, but growth will not be the only solution to these problems. We will also have to put constraints on spending growth. And so anyone that's selling the sort of one simple, easy trick, whether it be AI or anything else, I think is being overly simplistic and selling something that won't ultimately fix the problem.
You see it also as something for an excuse for not changing the behavior of spending. This theory then doing that, and actually, if we see all the good things AI brings, it will not solve all the problems and will not solve the old problem that if you spend more than the economy can provide for, you will have a problem. I think this was very interesting. Thank you so much for this talk with us. We appreciate that, and thank you.
Thanks for having me on.
That's it for this episode of Unconventional Knowledge, a podcast from Geopolitical Intelligence Services. Thank you for listening. New episodes are released on the first Monday of every month, so subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to stay updated. For more analysis on global affairs with a detailed focus on future scenarios, visit gisreportsonline.com. And if you'd like to explore how any of the trends discussed today could affect your business or industry, email us at advisory@gis.li for a consultation or a custom report. We'll see you next month.